welcome back to this class online, live streaming. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We are excited to have a wonderful panel here. First, a couple of notes. Dr. Bob is still out this week. He'll be back next week. And I really enjoyed reading all of your papers that you all submitted on Sunday, and I've really enjoyed watching your videos and learning a little bit more about each of you. So thank you for doing that on time. Reminder that you need to submit a reflection paper by Sunday, and if you have any preferences for the group assignments and who's in your group, just let me know by tomorrow. So, welcome. If each of you could introduce yourself, let's start with you, Kent.
Hi, my name is Kent Loftin. I'm currently the Chief Development Officer at the Montrose Center. That's Houston's LGBT Community Center. Before that, I was CDO at Interfaith Ministries, which does Meals on Wheels, refugee relocation, lots of other great work in bringing Houston's diverse communities together. And then before that, I worked with Special Olympics and Best Buddies. And so I'm mainly in fundraising, and my leadership comes from that area, and I can't wait to share a little bit more about that with you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tabinda Ghani. I'm the Manager of Client Services at Interfaith Ministries for Greater Houston, where Kent came from, so he already told you a little bit about it. Before working at IM, I worked at Amana Refugee Services, where I was the Senior Program Director. My background is in program development, design, and evaluation.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Phillip Nevels. I'm the Executive Director with the organization Discover You. I've been there for about a year now. It's been fantastic. So Discover You, essentially we act as a broker between many of the college and career prep programs that are local, national, and international, and between low-income communities within the city of Houston. So many times, many students who are in lower income communities don't have access to programs like Columbia University Business Camp or MIT Engineering Camp. We get information to those students, as well as providing financial aid, as well as helping students navigate that process. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, today we are having a Young Leaders and Nonprofits panel, as you can see. It is anywhere folks here in their 20s to upper 30s, 40s.
I'll never tell you. I'll never tell you.
Well, we all look young. I'm just kidding. So this is actually Dr. Sanborn's idea, and I thought it was really exciting, and it would just give a kind of different perspective for the week. So can you, each of you, just tell me a little bit about your leadership style? Each of you manage people and have a good bit of responsibility in your organizations. So Phillip, why don't we start with you?
Certainly. So in my organization, and it's a personal philosophy, I believe that empowering others is ideal. And so I'll hire folks who are very, very talented, who are very, very smart, who are very, very self-sufficient. And I believe that allows all of us in our organization to be a little bit more successful. We have seen that in Discover You, and I've seen that in every organization that I've ever been in. The managers who bring the most out of their staff are folks who are committed to their work. They trust their staff to do great work. And then our context also providing flexibility. So in our case, we're a small organization where we may have 4 full-time staff at any given time. But many times there are 4 folks in our staff now, or 3, that are part-time. 2 of them are brilliant people. They just happen to have families and want to be committed to their families and only want to work about part-time. I'm okay with that, because what they can do in 20, 25 hours a week is more than what many professionals can do in 40 hours. And so how do you find the right formula for the people that are already on your team, and how do you empower them to do their work very, very well? And if you're able to do that as a leader, your organization can be quite successful.
Great. What about Tabinda?
Oh, okay. Down earlier.
Yeah, I think so.
My leadership style is probably pretty similar to Phillip's. I think having the right people working for you makes a really big difference. It's a lot about empowering them. It's about empowering them and giving them and trusting them to do their job. I find that that when you hire the right people, you give them the right amount of work and you don't overwork them. You give them just the right amount. They're able to do a whole lot more. And rather than telling them how I want things done, I tell them what I want done and give them the flexibility to do it in their own style. I also supervise probably a few more people than I should. I've got about 8 staff under me, and then I've got about 4 interns that I supervise on any given day. So it's a big staff. So I have to have the ability to trust the people to do what they need to do without having constant supervision. So there's not a lot of micromanagement on my end, but there's a lot of deliverables. So I meet with everyone once a week to see what they're working on, what they need help with, how I can help them, and what their next steps are. And I think that really helps to make a difference in how the staff works together.
And I love that. I was actually briefly managed by Tabinda for a summer, and this kind of hands-on leadership, I think, or hands-off, like not micromanaging, is really hard, I think.
It can be, but it's about making sure that you have the right people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks. How about you, Ken?
When I was in college, I got really inspired by alternative theories to capitalism, specifically participatory economics. And inside participatory economics, it starts, you may be familiar with like co-ops in Austin. It's shared ownership. And that shared ownership has really inspired me to be a team builder. That's what I really like to do. I create teams and we share the goals, we share the ownership of whatever we need to do. I'm also not a good micromanager. I'm kind of a big picture guy. So I need implementers around me and people that can execute. And so that means that it's important for me as a manager or as a leader to be very, very clear about what the goals are. Have those spelled out, make sure that they are attainable and that people can move toward them. And then if you pump a lot of energy as a manager into your team and keep the goals very clear, you can find success a lot more regularly than in other methods that I've played around with.
Yeah. There's something that Kent said that was interesting, if it's appropriate, where what does it look like to know your own strengths? So you said you're not a good micromanager. It's about empowering others, but I think one key to leadership is know where you're not very good and know where you're really good, right? And so having the right team specifically, that means knowing the things that you need that complement your own skills, so that when those things come together, that you're optimizing that energy. You can pump a lot of energy into your team. You can work really hard, but if you guys don't have the right skills together in unison, or if you're working really hard on something that isn't your strength. So, for instance, we manage 10 schools maybe at any one given time, and our program director does a great job on facilitating training and conversation with school-based coordinators and teachers, right? I shouldn't be the one that's managing the relationships with teachers because that's not necessarily my strength and I don't live in that world. And that may be a bad example, but how do you understand your own strengths? And how do you find implementers? How do you find folks around you who get really excited about being very organized and being very detail oriented and being able to, so building booklets for when you're meeting with potential funders. People get excited about that. Yeah. It's not me. I don't get excited about it. But there are folks on your team who may get excited about that.
I love that. That's great. Last week, Dr. Payne and I touched briefly on this point about how really to be an effective leader, you need to know your own strengths and your own weaknesses. And getting to know that is something that I learned in my Master's in Social Work program. It's, really having some really good self-reflection. So what kind of things do you think that our students can do as they're preparing to be in nonprofit management or nonprofit leadership? What can they do to really get to know their own strengths and weaknesses?
I actually got to learn on the job a little bit more. There are some really fun tools, and I don't know how accessible they are to people not connected to organizations. So I love the predictive index. It was created by the US military. Don't let that turn you off, or maybe that excites you. And it really breaks down. In fact, Tabinda's laughing because she's also used the PI. That really helps you figure out the way that you're wired. It breaks it down in a couple of digestible areas. For me, I'm very low in formality. That's what it means to not be detail-oriented for the predictive index. And this is not a personality tests, although the personality tests are interesting as well. But there's a lot of kind of work skill tools out there. And I did not believe in them at all at first. Like, you could not convince me that these work until I used them for, a decade. And I'm like, wow, I can't hire without having them fill out these tools. And so I think that my big piece of advice is I was skeptical for so long. Try to give them a little benefit of the doubt and see what you learn when you play around with them.
Yeah, I would actually recommend taking the Myers-Briggs. It's something that's available. There's a free version that's available online. It tells you everything you want to know about yourself and everything you don't want to know about yourself. And lots of things that you probably just don't want to acknowledge. But it's a great tool, and if you Google it, you'll get like a type, maybe ENFP or whatever it may be. It's it's 4 different letters, but when you Google those 4 letters after you take the test, it'll tell you, there's so many articles out there that'll tell you everything from what your work style is, to what your personality is, to what kind of leadership you respond to, and honestly, I found that to be really effective in my teams too. So when I started at IM, I already had 7 employees working for me, and they had been there for a really long time under a number of different managers. So I didn't have the capacity to bring someone new onto my team. It was just, but I didn't know what I was walking into. And having all of my team take that test really helped me to see where they were coming from, what was important to them, and how I should be treating them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think my answer is particularly scientific in how I understand my own strengths and weaknesses. I think the answer is trial and error and failure more often than not. I learn by having experiences. I learn by getting there, and the question is around knowing our strengths and weaknesses around leadership. It's really just trying to figure out. I let my curiosity, in the past, my curiosity has encouraged the types of things that I get involved with in a nonprofit space or in my volunteer space, or even professionally. Some of those things I've been good at, and there's things that I've certainly haven't not been good at, or they haven't been particularly interesting. And that's been my mode of experience. And even when we're talking about your strengths of managing others, I would say that that's being about empathy and being able to understand where someone else is coming from so that you can adjust. Like, I can have 3 different personalities with 3 different people because I know I'm empathetic and I'm sensitive to how they're feeling, and that allows me to be a better manager. It's not particularly scientific. I can't tell you what approach I take to do that, but it's really listening and really understanding where they are. That would be part 2.
I want to pick up on something Phillip shared. When I was 25, I became executive director of a statewide organization in Texas. I did not practice professional patience. I should not have said yes to that job, but it was there, they offered it to me, and it was actually through failing at that position where I learned the first big set of, okay, these are the things I'm not good at. And I'm not recommending everyone go out there and take a position that's much bigger than your experience to find out what you're good and not good at. But I wanted to echo what Phillip said. Through failing and through actually having to take 6 months off after that job because I was so burnt out, trying to work so hard to do the things I wasn't good at, I learned that, wow, there's got to be a better fit for me in organizations. There's got to be a better mold or role for me to step into where I can be successful.
That's great. That kind of leads me into another question I wanted to ask. Tell me about a time you think you failed particularly as a leader. How did you handle it? What did you learn from it? And how did it make you a better leader?
Do you guys want me to finish? since I already threw it out there. What were all of those points again? So there was an organization that some of you may have volunteered for called Best Buddies. It matches people with intellectual disabilities with high school and college students for socialization and job programs. I became the state director of Best Buddies Texas after working for the organization for a few years. It was one of these nonprofits where you have 2 staff members besides you. The executive director does everything from take out the trash to all the fundraising to the board to managing the programs to hiring and firing the staff. It was a big job with few resources, and it wasn't a complete failure. They were a stronger organization when I left them, but I was a much depleted leader. And I think that's the failure. I ran really hard at that position and worked really hard to be successful, and I didn't have the skills, the tools yet in my career to be successful in that position. And so what I learned is there's this thing called professional patience. It means that sometimes you say no to opportunities and you really evaluate whether they're a good fit for you, whether they're a good fit for your work-life balance, whether they align with your goals, like what you want to do next, or what kind of cause or change or impact you want to make. I wasn't thinking as much about that. I was just thinking, wow, this is a really big step for someone in their mid-20s. And it was, and I learned the hard way that it was too big.
Wow, thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's next?
Phillip.
So I am 29. I was 28 when I was offered the job to be executive director at Discover U. And it's certainly a big job with lots of responsibilities and not always a lot of resources and lots of challenges along the way. And there's lots of things that are outside of our control. So I guess my response is it's not about, in our end, we have been very successful in what we've done in our work. And you give all you can, right? You have to manage that. You have to manage that process. But if I'm 30 years old or 32 or 33, and the organization says, Phillip, you're no longer the right leader for this space. I think as a leader, you have to be okay with that, because you have to say, have I done everything that I could, the best I could? Did I prepare the way that I was supposed to? Did I explore all of the options of the work within our organization? Did I empower people to lead? And so this story is not about failure. Ideally, this story is about success, but it's about the mindset that I think you have to have around failure, that even if in this nonprofit space that we are not successful, which I believe we have been for the last 10 years and we will be moving forward, that it's okay, right? That the challenge is being okay with the possibility of failure. That's a challenge as a leader, I would say, and probably one of the biggest challenges that you face. Being 25 as an ED is hard. Being 28, 29 as an ED is hard, especially when most of your job is raising money, very large amounts of money, often with people that you've never interacted with, who are not in your generation and may not be from the same city that you're in, right? All those things really influence it. But again, if you want to be a leader, I encourage you to be a leader, but be okay with failure, and have the mindset that even if you don't succeed, that's okay.
Great, thanks. Tabinda?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a specific circumstance. I think more where I failed as a leader was assuming that I could do the job that I did not yet know. I think when I started at Interfaith Ministries, it was a great opportunity. It was working with seniors, and I'd never, ever, ever worked with seniors. I had a grandmother that was as close as I got to working with seniors. So they put a lot of faith in me when they hired me. And I knew it would be a pretty steep learning curve, as this was a population that I'd never worked with. But I think I thought that I understood things too soon. I started feeling like I was understanding seniors. I knew where this population was going. I'd done so much research. I knew what was out there. I knew what the other agencies were that were out there. And I put a lot of faith in the anecdotes, I guess, of my staff, who would tell me, I went and I did this, and I went and I did this. But I think although I felt competent in working with seniors, what I wasn't yet competent in was working with the organization. So as big of an organization as Interfaith Ministries is, it's 150 people. It's huge. It's one of the largest in Houston in the nonprofit sector. But there are dynamics, as there are in any organization. There are a lot of dynamics. There are a lot of things that you have to get permission for, and you have hoops to jump through, all to make an impact. And I thought I could just make an impact. It was going to be that simple. And I think I underestimated the amount of other little soft skills that I would have to gain in order to be able to do that. And I think along the way, I let some people down, but hopefully I've learned and improved.
Wonderful. Well, I know that when I remember working under you, one big lesson I learned from you was to, especially in the role of social services, to really take each perspective you get, like with a grain of salt. And that, the story we get from a senior is going to be different than the story we get from the staff member who served them their meal, which is different from the story we get from their supervisor who packed the meal or whatever. And so somewhere in there is a path forward, but really being open to all of those ideas. So that's really awesome. Let's see. Can we talk about millennials?
Yeah.
All right. So I think they get a bad rap, but I really think that every generation, there was some BuzzFeed thing one time that was like all of the Time magazine covers for like generations, starting in like the 40s or 50s. And like, it's just, oh my gosh, they're the worst. Like whatever the reason is, they're the worst. Watch out for them. And so either we have had jobs in nonprofits as millennials, we have to work with other millennials, or supervise other millennials. Can you give our class some advice? A lot of them are they're older than 20, but in their maybe 40s, 50s, and have had a lot of great experiences on their own. So can you just give them some advice with working with this generation?
Okay, as a millennial, and I am a millennial, I would say that I'm currently in a position where I'm working with someone that is not a millennial. I'm actually working with a lot of baby boomers, not just in my clients, but in staff. I'm managing some baby boomers and I'm managing some millennials, and at the same time, I'm working only for baby boomers. I'm probably one of the youngest in the organization. And one of the things that I found is that it is really important as a millennial, because we do get a horrible rep, not altogether undeserved, but as we have this reputation, know that everyone is looking at you through that lens of millennial. As much as you don't want to be the millennial in the room, you are the millennial in the room, and they're expecting you to be of those stereotypes. I'm completely expected to understand technology. I'm supposed to be able to fix computers. I'm supposed to know how to do everything. I'm not really tech savvy. So it took me a while to really comprehend why everyone thinks that I can. I've never showed any specific skill set in IT, but there is an expectation, and it's important to know how you're going to be perceived, and it's important to know who you're working with. So working for my current boss, we actually talked about it early on, that he is a baby boomer. It is important to him that I'm at my desk at 8:30 and not at 8:32. Although he feels that he's much more relaxed about it and he can handle 8:32, I know working for him that 8:32 is not the same as coming in at 8:30. I understand that there's a difference there. It's about knowing who you're working with and who you're working for, and knowing which generation they're from. And obviously no one's going to fit all the stereotypes. I just explained how I don't really know IT. But having that framework and having that background, knowing that my boss is from an era where his parents had to work all the time, where he grew up being expected to work all of the hours and retire and get pension and all of that, gives me a little bit of understanding into some of the nuances in his work style.
That's fascinating. You talked about work hours. So in my staff, they are not required to turn in timesheets. They are not required to be at the office. We work almost primarily remotely. When we have our team meetings, we meet in coffee shops more often. We have an office, we have a space, we have a boardroom, but we like coffee shops. I think I know some of my staff, they don't get online until about 9:30, 10 o'clock a.m. At the same time, there's some staff that may be working at 7 or 8 p.m., right? And so I think about even myself, when I come up with some of my best ideas, it's 12, it's 1 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes. And if I'm working with someone who is a baby boomer who would expect me to be at the office at 7:30 sitting down, I'm probably not going to be particularly productive for the next 2 hours, not because I don't want to, but it's certainly, it's not something that comes quite natural to me, right? I'm getting better in flipping my schedule, but I think if you're working with millennials, at an organization level, thinking about what does it look like to have conversations about that individual schedule and their life outside of work, and to make sure that their schedule allows them to be optimal in what they can output. It doesn't make any difference if you have to be at work at 8:30, but you're only getting 5 hours of work. So I do believe in maximizing productivity in every single minute that the staff has. I just believe that you have to allow them to build and understand when they're most productive for the purpose of the organization.
Very cool.
I want to go after the question first. I hope no one out there, because I can't see who you are, have ever come to my presentations on millennials, but when we're just like this and we're just chatting, I'm not sure I believe in generation theory. I kind of put it in the same category as maybe like the zodiac. It's neat. Now, no offense to my hardcore astrologers out there, but I'm not sure how useful it is. We spend a lot of time. I get asked to speak a lot about millennials. And that kind of preamble aside, when you're older and you're working with younger, context, they need to understand the big picture. And you'll think, I'm the boss. They don't need to know all those pieces. But I've found the teams where I explain more and give them a bigger view, they're more successful. They're more motivated to run toward their goals. The other thing, when you're older and you're managing a group of younger, because actually I've managed probably 3 times as many more millennials than people in older demographics, because nonprofits don't have a lot of money, especially the ones I've worked for. They're doing great social change, great social work, which means they're finding people that are relatively young, out of college, training them up until they move into those institutional positions at universities, at hospitals. You have to pump a lot of energy into the system. You have to do a lot of stuff to maintain your team. Feedback, and both on performance and just regularly. Even more than, and I'm a pretty outgoing guy, even more than I sometimes feel is necessary. On the other side, if you're a millennial, because I imagine some of you guys are out there in that 32 and younger demographic, you're going to be stepping in as those young leaders that they're training up into a lot of leadership roles. Try humility. Try not to dominate at first. There's been some executive teams that I've stepped onto in these big organizations that have been around for 50 to 100 years, and they've had staff there for 25 years. And then all of a sudden, I'm the young guy in there, and I just want to tackle everything and change everything and communicate all the ideas, all the creative things I have in my head, and that is not a way to get it done.
Thank you. So we had some pretty interesting questions pop up here. Let's see, Naomi Panarea asks, where did it go? What's the next level? What's the next level of nonprofit management for each of you?
So I'll jump in first. So I've been working for medium to small social service nonprofits. And so I have 2 pathways, really. I can train up this time and then become an executive director of a medium-sized nonprofit, the CEO, executive director. But I do have 5 or 6 more years and an advanced degree I need to get under my belt in order to do that. Or I can move over to institutional fundraising. These are all of those really large nonprofits. Some arts organizations, universities, the big higher ed, and all of the, what am I forgetting? Hospitals, right. There's a lot of money, a lot of resources. I could double my salary and do a lot less work over there. And so I've really enjoyed being kind of in the trenches. Being in smaller social service nonprofits means you're closer to the change. You're making a bigger impact. You're building a Meals on Wheels building, or you're building the first LGBT affordable senior center in the South, But if I moved over to a hospital, I wouldn't be having those fun, exciting, massive projects, but it would be really good for me and my career.
Yeah, it's something that I don't know the answer to yet. I would say, in my spare time, I think about what would it look like to move to the mountains of Colorado and start a brewery and retire from nonprofit life. And I think about that. I think probably the other answer for me is I'm interested in what does it look like to move Discover You from a medium to small organization to an organization that has national impact, or that has national centers around the country, right? And so from a very entrepreneurial standpoint on saying we have intellectual property, right? We have lots of things that regardless of where you are in the country, that schools, school districts, cities could certainly benefit from the services and products that Discover You does. So what does it look like to continue to scale that up and partner with folks around the country and around the world who are interested in investing in our work? I think that's the first place that my mind goes over the next 10 years in saying we have many ideas on the table and we have great energy and great synergy, and what does it look like to continue to build that up? The traditional track, Kent talked about the traditional track where people go. People go to, in my case, if you're executive director for a small organization, folks end up at private foundations often. They end up being funders, funding kind of the work that we're doing. That's a traditional track that folks do. I would say on my end, I'm certainly interested in arts and social services, education. And so there may be a day in which I'm interested in going back to the funding space and being on that side relative to being an executive director of a medium or small organization. I think there's a reason why executive directors and CEOs burn out, right? There's a reason why their family lives are tough sometimes. There's a reason why relationships for EDs and CEOs aren't always great, or they aren't able to spend very much time with their children. And so I think I'm working through that, and I haven't figured out the answer yet, except to say lots of people go to foundations and lots of people go to hospitals and universities, because you do double your salary, and instead of working 60 or 65 hours a week, I'm working a normal 40 hours a week like a normal person. And I'm not losing my hair right here, so I don't know.
Maybe you can combine this like Colorado brewery thing with like the foundation thing.
Fair enough.
Good luck with that.
For me, it's a little more complicated than that. I'm not looking at a traditional trajectory. The next step up for me would be in a director level position. At this point in my life, I'm not interested in a director level position, and I'm finally comfortable saying that. I don't want to be a director, and I think that's okay. It's about knowing myself, it's about knowing my strengths. The position where I'm in now, so education-wise, I'm both a social worker and I also have my MBA. The position that I'm in now gives me direct access to clients, so for me, it motivates me because I can see that the work that I'm doing is making a difference. Being able to go out, spend an hour with a senior and have them tell me how much of an impact getting these meals is making in their lives means so much more to me than going out and fundraising. Fundraising is fantastic for people with that skill set, but I don't quite have that, and that's not really my strengths. And moving up vertically, moving up the chain would mean that I would need to develop that skill. I would need to be someone that can go out and make relationships and fundraising and all of that fun stuff that just does not excite me. So I don't have any interest in doing that. I do intend to continue to grow. One of my biggest wishes is actually to be able to create a program at Meals on Wheels that is replicable across the nation. The senior demographic is not getting any smaller, and the reality is that there's a lot of challenges that are coming, and they're coming fast. There's 10,000 seniors that turn 65 every day. This population is growing rapidly, and it's something that although we foresaw, we aren't necessarily the most prepared for. And so there are a lot of potential programs that can be created. And what I'd love to do is create something that we can replicate across the nation. I'd love to help other Meals on Wheels or other senior service organizations get programs like ours up and running.
That's exciting.
Tabinda's pivot to mission was humbling. It made me think of something I should probably share. It's not as technical as what are the next steps, but the organization I work for now, the LGBT Community Center, is much, much smaller than the organization that I left. But I worked for 3 years to get this position, because this is the work on a mission level that I've always wanted to do. If you can't tell, I'm a gay guy, and my experience and the work that this organization does is so powerful to me that even though it's smaller and harder and kind of starting over from scratch, and doesn't have the opportunities maybe to pay me into the future the way some other orgs can, I've never been as happy. And so I worked on the fringe volunteering and donating and just kind of being a part of this organization so that after about 3 years I could become this there. And that's another thing to think about. It's not always about the pathway up, the next title, the money. And it took me about a decade to figure out what I really wanted to do. And I didn't think it was LGBTQ work at first. But now that I found that, I could be there a really long time and could be happy there a really long time.
That's great. Wonderful. I just really love listening to all that. I'm like so absorbed, not even thinking about the next thing. Okay. But we had a couple of questions about stress. Like, how do y'all manage stress at your job? It's important not to freak out in front of other people, right? And we were just talking about before we got here, or before we started filming, how hard some weeks can be. So what do y'all think?
Buy good scotch.
Bike and scotch.
No, buy good scotch. No, so for me, that may be true actually. But I think for me, I have hobbies outside of my work. So a few months ago, I was training and did my first triathlon, right? I was on the couch a couple weekends ago and said, you know what? And this is one of the few weekends in which I wasn't working. I said, I might as well sign up for a marathon. So I signed up for a marathon. And I wouldn't.
Those things you do.
but they engage my mind and my body in a different way, and it allows me to focus on something greater than my work. The truth is, many times I dream about work. This is the first thing that I think about when I wake up, and often the last thing that I think about when I go to bed. But having these other things that are really important and that I'm really investing back to myself allows me to have balance and manages my stress. If I'm working out through the week consistently, I'm happier, I'm healthier, I feel better, I have better communication with people. So even if your hobby is not based on some physical feat, something that you can look forward to that engages your mind and body in a way that's different than your work is important.
Great advice.
I think it's important to connect with your client population. For me, it's really, really valuable to go out and sit with our seniors and to talk to them. I know that at times it can feel like I am answering 500 emails that are all urgent and need to be done by tomorrow and the end of business day, but it's important for me to be able to take a step back and say, hey, you know what? I'm not a doctor. No one's going to die if I don't get this work done on time. If something is a little delayed, or if I don't get to it by the end of the day, it's okay. And for me to be able to step back, say that, and relax a little bit. It can be really stressful for me. There are certain weeks where I am behind a desk all the time. I'm behind a desk the entire week. I haven't gone outside. I haven't done anything. And that's, for me personally, that's when it really starts to feel very, very stressful. I don't see the importance of what I'm doing. I'm only looking at my emails. I'm only looking at my team. I'm not really seeing the impact that I'm making. For me, it's really important to see the impact, to go out there, to sit with the seniors. I agree with Phillip. I think it's really important to have hobbies. And one other thing that's really helped me is to say, you know what, I can't volunteer at work. I need to do the amount of hours that I'm required to do. I can do some over, but if I let this work consume me, it will. It really will. And anytime that you're working in the nonprofit world, you see some things that are really happy and wonderful and make you love life, and there's certain things that happen that make you question your existence and make you miserable and hate people. It just happens in the sector. And I can't let that be my life. I need to be able to step away from this. I need to be able to make conscious time. So for example, even though I am very much engaged in my phone, checking email and things like that, I limit it on the weekends. I virtually never check my email on Saturdays and Sundays. I know that means there's a pile of work for me on Monday, but Saturdays and Sundays are family time, and my email can't get in the way.
Great.
The place where I try to start is with the fit. I talked a little bit about this, but the better I've got at finding positions that highlight my skill set and align with my passions, the more it minimizes stress. Doesn't eliminate it, but it makes it better. We've talked about that state director position for Best Buddies. There were so many things there I wasn't doing, and the stress was out of control. The other thing is that work-life balance. We do a lot of mental health care work at the Montrose Center. We talk about self-care all the time. Self-care, self-care, self-care. But I believe in it. Like Sunday Fun Day, like there's these time periods that are just mine that can't be taken away from. There's no magic pill for stress. Everyone's gonna have their own unique experience on how to slay that dragon. But listen to that stress indicator. When it's getting really, really, really high, ask those questions. Is this position good for you? If it's a change, what has changed? It's okay. I think we are called to do this because we want to make such a big impact in the world. And sometimes I think feel like we have to be martyrs to do that, but you don't. In fact, if you take that martyrdom road, you most likely burn yourself out and not be effective, not be able to accomplish what you want to do the next decade, the next decade, the next decade. So don't be martyr. That's how you deal with stress.
That's great. One other question that I do want to ask, I don't think anyone's touched on it on Twitter, but each of you in your roles deals with a lot of other nonprofits. At Interfaith Ministries and Social Services, you are referring out constantly. Phillip, you work in schools, and schools have a lot of nonprofits, and we work with you at our nonprofit. And at the Montrose Center, I mean, y'all are at the center of the LGBT community in Houston and know everything that's going on in that realm. So I'm wondering, a lot of our students have expressed interest in creating their own nonprofits, and they're just really passionate. They have this one problem they see that is real and that needs to be addressed. But in Houston, we have something like 10,000 nonprofits. It's
More.
15? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
15,000 in Harris County, correct.
So can you give us a little bit of advice or perspective on that?
Can you ask the question one more time?
For students who really want to start a nonprofit or see a specific need in the community, what is your advice for them given the number of nonprofits and the competition for dollars and volunteers and staff that's already out there?
I'm going to start, if I can, because I worked with an organization that had a founder. And there's this thing called founder syndrome. It's real. If you're in this field for a while, and if those of you who've been in the field for a while, people that found things and it becomes about them, boy, does that get in the way of the mission. Don't be that founder. It's not about us. It's really not about us. I would recommend anyone that wants to start a nonprofit to work in the industry for many years, at least 5, maybe 10. You need to see all that it takes, and you need to really see what's out there. It's so much easier to work within a system that needs talent and make an impact when they've already built the platform and they've already formed the board and raised the basic money. It's so difficult. There's so many nonprofits that fail every year. It's much higher than the number of restaurants in Houston that close or whatever. I think we think that we're the only ones that know, especially for millennials. I'm going to speak back into generations theory that I believe so much in. We think we're the only ones that have seen it, that we can do it, but you're just making it a lot harder than it needs to be for you. The United Way has a 211 helpline. If you're ever curious if the service exists, call them, because they know every single nonprofit and what they do, at least that offer social services. So in my area, that's very convenient. And then you may, after 10 years, realize, okay, it's really not there, we really have to build it. And then make sure that you get the education, the books, and you know what it takes, because it takes a lot. It's not a lot of fun to build one from scratch.
Yeah, there's hardly a new idea in a nonprofit space. It may take a different perspective, or it may have a slightly different lens, but there's hardly a new idea. One of the things I see in nonprofits, especially young nonprofits, people fail to realize how hard it is and how fundamentally important it is to be able to raise sufficient capital to make that work actually happen. I probably come from the perspective that if you have 10 nonprofits that are all working with schools all in the same way, they should probably be 1 to 2 nonprofits that are doing the same thing, that are maximizing their efforts, that are pulling their donors together, that are using their energy in a way that's a little more efficient. And so if you're interested in starting a nonprofit, great, but I would argue that there's probably an idea that exists out there, and you're right, most of nonprofits don't have enough money to fully execute and implement the ideas that they have in the first place, which it doesn't take away from your mission, but it just takes away from the impact of your mission. If you have kind of this big idea of wanting to change the world, if you don't have the right capital, you're not going to do it. And then specifically, I would say people who start nonprofits typically start with their heart first and thinking about money second. I think you have to start with money first, and then your heart comes behind it. And I only say that because we live in the Houston world where it's highly competitive. People are all going after the same money, right? And unless you have kind of one or two what we call sweetheart funders, I don't know, who fully are invested in your work and are going to fund it, like almost fully fund it, then it's not always in your best interest to start a nonprofit.
Okay, so I'm actually the co-founder of a nonprofit. So I've gone through this process. I've done the whole founding process, creating, where we thought nobody was out there helping these people that we really, really needed to help. I've done that. I would not suggest doing it. Now, the thing is, even if you think of this brilliant idea, let's say you think of refugee after-school programs, and you think no one out there does it, which someone does. Okay, there's multiple organizations that do. But let's say you're the first one to think of this idea, and no one has, and you're going to do this, you're going to create this program, and you're going to help these kids. A, do you have program design skills? B, are you sure that this is what those refugee kids want? C, is there a nonprofit out there that helps refugees? Is there another nonprofit that targets this specific population? Maybe they don't do after-school programs. Maybe they do, I don't know, backpacks. Maybe they do something completely different. Maybe they do dental work. But is there a way that you can partner or become a program or do something with another nonprofit that already exists? The reason for this is that let's go with this refugee after school program. You've got this, right? Great idea. Now what do you need? You need HR, because you need someone that's going to help you do volunteer management. You need someone in finance who's going to help you manage your money. You need a leader, and you need someone that's going to develop the program. And if you think you're all four, you're likely not. Or the chances of you having a skill set and doing all four and then also being the fundraiser is pretty small. You're going to need a couple of staff members, and that means overhead. So you've got overhead of, say, $100K right now. Then you need the program supplies. Then you need to go get the kids. Then you need to do transportation. Every single nonprofit is going to have all of these other expenses attached to, and you need to be able to fundraise that amount of money. Even if you have, a few people that are going to support you and are behind your work, and they're going to volunteer and they're going to do all of this stuff for free, eventually you will need capital. So if you're looking at a nonprofit, don't look at it as I'm going to start this thing that's going to be good for 2 or 3 years and then I'll figure it out after. No, you need to have a long-term game plan, because at the end of the day, if your nonprofit folds, it's the clients that you're impacting negatively.
Fantastic points. I think our Twitter feed kind of just went silent. Which is like a disappointment. There are a couple of people out there who I think it's really good to just kind of tell it like it is, especially in this sort of venue. And I like what you said about, all three of you touched on this, is if some nonprofit is reaching that same demographic or doing something anywhere near similar, there's a chance that in their 5 and 10 year plan, they're considering pivoting to the idea that you have. So in Children at Risk, for example, we have we currently focus on 4 issue areas, one of them being education, which can be so broad. So anything you want to do in education and advocacy, don't start your own, let us know, we might be thinking about it. So it's just, those are all really good points. Let's do something fun. If anyone were to play you in a movie, who would it be? I know it's a hard one, but I know Kent has an answer in his back pocket.
Well, we got the questions in advance, and I was like, don't ask this question. Because I definitely have done nothing close to being put into a movie, but that is, when it is about me, I want to make that big of an impact. But I'm a big fan of Bradley Cooper. I think he's very, very hot. I hope it's okay that I say that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think everyone's a fan of him. What about you?
I have no idea.
Okay, there can be
no
a pass.
Earthly idea. Come on, Phillip, get this for both of us.
So, I am a fan of many comedians, and I would say Bill Maher is my favorite comedian, and I would like Bill Maher. We don't look alike at all, but it's okay. But I think Bill Maher would be a great Phillip.
Wonderful. Well, and are each of you from Houston, or where are you from? Can you talk a little bit about that, just so that
Sure.
people can know?
I'm from further east than Houston, but Texas. It was very fun to be a young, not very sports-oriented gay man where I was from.
Beaumont? Around there?
Not a town you would know.
Okay.
And you may be from there, and I don't want to say bad things about my hometown. But all of my schooling, and then the only time I lived outside of Houston was when I came out to my family and then had to leave the state for a little while. So then I lived in Miami, which was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Well, I'm from Houston, born and raised. Houstonian through and through.
Great.
Yep. And I grew up in Dallas. Both my parents were originally from Houston, but met and got married in college in Dallas, and so that's where me and my brother were raised. And I think you and I have spoken about this before. I think it's funny that often where we come from and our family influences how we think about the world. So, for instance, my mother was a social worker working at one of the Head Start centers in inner city Dallas in the 80s, right? And my father ran a nonprofit, was president for a nonprofit,
Wow.
and it was called the Oak Cliff Development Corporation, and they built affordable housing in kind of the inner city Dallas community when no one else was building affordable housing in that place. And so I think, yes, I'm from Dallas, but also I'm from a family of people who have given their life to public service in many ways, and it has definitely influenced my track in life.
Very cool. Is there anything else y'all want to add that you think that our students should know? They're in a graduate program right now, if you don't know this, so it's a nonprofit leadership program. So is there anything else that you just like to
I have a small
impart?
soapbox. You're all grad students, so this probably doesn't apply to you, but you will get or have gotten that what is the nonprofit field? Do you get paid? Is this a real career path? All that fun stuff. And I think one of the things we have to do as a community is really strive and execute toward excellence. There are some people out there that think, oh, I'll go work nonprofit after I've done my hard corporate career. And it won't be that hard, and I won't have to wear nice clothes, and I can come in when I want to and just kind of get it done. But I think the work that we do is so vital. We're in the sacred trust with the federal government. They give a tax write-off so that we can be a big active part of the social safety net. We have to continue to explain to the community, because we need them to give more, much higher than the 2% average of people's average wealth that they're giving. We really need to do this work more like 4 to 6%. And so in order to do that, we have to be more excellent as organizations. We have to execute better, and we have to continue to explain why this field is so vital. So that's my little soapbox.
I like it. That's true. A lot of people just think it's super fun and easy, and you don't get paid, but you can get paid. You can do good work. There's jobs out there, and it requires a skill. Like anything.
I'd say know yourself. I think that that's really, really important. We talked a bit about knowing your strengths and weaknesses as a leader, as an employee, but know yourself as a person. I think that's going to be pivotal for you guys as you venture into your careers. Like I said, when I talked about myself, that I'm more of a program person. I'm not someone that's going to go up on the management ladder or is necessarily interested in it, because I know what motivates me. And you'll find that if you look for things, and Kent mentioned this earlier, if you find something to do that motivates you, that you're passionate about, it's going to make a big difference, because burnout in this career is very, very real. It can really start to feel like numbers. It can start to feel like emails. It can start to feel like not what you came in here for. And you may believe that everything is going to be wonderful and rosy, and everything will be easy, and you're going to make a difference, and everything's going to be good. It can be just as challenging as a for-profit career. And you've got to do everything you can do to make it so that you can keep working, knowing that you're not getting the benefits at the same level of benefits or the same type of benefits as you would in the corporate sector. And you have to be comfortable with that. Be real with yourself.
Yeah. I think on my end, it's as a graduate student, you have an opportunity to invite people to lunch, invite people to coffee, invite people to breakfast that you've never met, who are also CEOs and executive directors and presidents of institutions. As a graduate student, people respond to that and are usually happy to accept your invitation to join you. And so, yes, you're listening to us today, and yes, you'll hear many more speakers in this class and in other formats, but having one-on-one conversations about what you're interested in, what you've done, and how you're thinking about your career, and just learning how other people have navigated their own life provides some invaluable insight that, especially as a graduate student, that you have access to. I would say number two is that if you're going to be in a nonprofit space, and this probably applies to the corporate space as well, how do we think about people first? How do we give people more flexible schedules? How do we think about what are the benefits, providing benefits in the nonprofit space, benefits that make sense for them and for their families? How do we set up remote offices? How do we think about productivity, not in a way that many of our past leaders have thought about it, but in a way that works best for people in their lifestyles? I would argue that people are more effective, they're more committed, they appreciate it when we're more thoughtful about like how can they organize their own life and still all of us achieve kind of goals that we all believe in. That would be, I think in a nonprofit, you have an opportunity to experiment with that. If you're leading a nonprofit in a large corporate organization, not so much, but I would say that's fundamentally necessary to how to have more balance and have less stress and have the right people on the team and be empathetic in your work.
Wonderful. Well, y'all have all given some really great advice today. I think our students learned a lot, and from the look at these comments, and one of them is Tabinda, that was so refreshing. Like, people are like giving shout outs here, but it's great, and I really appreciate your time. And students, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed it. Dr. Bob will be back next week, and he will be interviewing Houston City Council member Jerry Davis. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week.